Hey everybody, it's time for another exciting episode of Bible Stories Few Read to the Bitter End. Tonight, we're going to learn about Jacob, Dick for Hire. You can find this in Genesis chapter 29, verse 31, all the way through chapter 30. So this week, I thought it would be kind of fun to put some biblical sexy time into the spotlight and share a tale of love at first sight that leads to a drunken night of passion with the wrong lover. But of course, like all these stories always do, it gets worse. Much, much worse. The story of Jacob and Rachel is a famous one in the Bible, mostly due to the fact that he falls in love with her at first sight, asks her father to allow her to marry him in exchange for several years' worth of work, and on the night of the wedding, the father-in-law switches out Rachel for his older daughter Leah instead, unbeknownst to a presumably very drunk Jacob. Hey, wedding feasts are rocking-ass parties. This results in Jacob having a morning walk of shame after realizing he is being stuck with Leah as a wife, as it was a tradition that the eldest sister gets married first. He then has to work an additional 7 years in order to pay the father-in-law off to marry Rachel, his true love, which he eventually does. Now, this is usually where the tale ends for most folks in church, and Jacob and Rachel, they really don't show back up in Bible study until their son Joseph and his coat of many colors enters the scene. So you gotta imagine a lot is lost in between Jacob's struggle to earn his beloved and the tale of their son Joseph overcoming sibling rivalry. Okay, now this story, it's literally like a Jerry Springer show in telling, and if you like HBO soap operas like Spartacus or Borgias, then you are missing out on a pretty juicy tale of love, politics, sex, and man-whoring. And with that said, I think we'll just go ahead and dig in where this tale leaves off. Jacob agreeing to work an additional 7 years in order to obtain the right to his true love Rachel. Now, fast forward a few years into his new servitude contract, and you're going to find that the older sister Leah is feeling pretty rejected by Jacob. So God decides basically to let her have the kids to earn Jacob's love and respect his first wife. After all, kids by a wife you didn't want in the first place will fix everything. Oh, and God also decides to put a spiritual IUD into Rachel's womb during this time. Because, we got to keep things fair. We can't have any competition. Now, personally, I find it rather amazing Leah was so self-absorbed to not realize that if you trick a guy into fucking you while he is drunk on his wedding night to his promised true love, that you're going to have a bad day, especially following said lovemaking. That old adage about the morning after with the lights actually on, it really does hold true. But when you couple that with mandatory marriage for the fuck you didn't even want and an extra 7 years labor to earn the love of your life, it really appears Leah seriously has a problem with understanding the price tag of manipulation and forced relationships. Now, granted, being the oldest daughter, Leah did have first dibs back then when it comes to marriage, but it makes one wonder why her father wouldn't just tack Rachel onto the deal automatically. I don't know if it was just her weak eyes made her more unappealing to Jacob than Rachel, or maybe her dad was seriously shorthanded on the family farm and was willing to keep the hired help on by any means necessary. But regardless, here we are, one drunken night of switched wife fucking later, and Leah's now hoping that popping out kids will finally earn her marital bliss despite the circumstances of her earning the whole top bitch title in the family hierarchy to begin with. And 4 pregnancies later, and all of which ended in healthy sons, she has zero luck with Cupid's aim at Jacob's heart. And with that failure, God decides neither of the two sisters are going to have babies with Jacob. But it gets worse. Despite still being the winner in the battle for love, Rachel is left without any children. And because God loves sibling rivalry so much, is all I can guess, this continues to even a more horrible kind of family drama. And if you don't believe me on the whole sibling rivalry and God's love of it, all you need to do is read the story of Jacob and his brother Esau, or Rachel's future son Joseph and his brothers, Cain and Abel, or even the prodigal son parable. God really does like to see siblings fight. So after years of being childless, Rachel finally starts bitching at Jacob about it, thinking maybe it's his fault somehow. And he ain't having that attitude. He straight up blames Yahweh for her being childless. After all, he's got 4 healthy sons with a woman he doesn't even love. So Rachel decides to circumvent God's will and has Jacob marry her personal servant to act as a surrogate. And wouldn't you know, Jacob agrees, and 10 months later, there's a bundle of joy in Rachel's arms. So Rachel's ecstatic. She's convinced she's specifically allowed this child by God. and she encourages Jacob to knock up her servant sister wife again. And he obliges, and a second child is had with this woman. Now, other than the entrapment into marriage with Leah, an additional 7 years' work to pay off Rachel, and 6 sons by 2 women he didn't want to have to marry to begin with, the story isn't too unusual for ancient times, I would think. I mean, barter and trade of women in marriage was a standard practice to solve tribal disputes, unite clans, and everything else. But at this point, when readers begin to think everyone's ticking biological clocks have finally been satisfied, the rivalry between the 2 sisters is just starting to take off. I'm even beginning to feel pity for Jacob at this point. I mean, he's in the middle of it all and just trying to find some happiness and less marital headache. But he isn't so lucky. With the surrogate's birthing of 2 healthy sons for Rachel, the eldest sister Leah is pissed. She wants to keep her 4-point lead in the heir to the throne department. So, seeing how God had decided to put her womb on hold after having no success in earning Jacob's respect with 4 sons, she goes the surrogate route too. Yeah, she insists Jacob marry her personal servant and conceive a child. And he obliges. So, try to keep up here. We now see Jacob with 4 wives, 3 of whom he never planned to marry or even desired, 2 of which he had to marry in order to legitimatize the offspring he produced with them. On top of that, he has 6 children now, none of whom come from his true love, Rachel. And I emphasize true love here because what man, especially in a biblical story, would jump through so many hoops if it weren't for love? But like I said, he humored the elder sister and knocked up her servant. Twice. After all, I mean, she's the first wife, and with her position comes mandatory accommodation. And this puts the total at 8 kids altogether. And we're still at just 4 wives, though. But things are about to take an even more ridiculous turn. Mandrakes. Now, for those not familiar with this plant, the best way I can describe this plant would be that it's hallucinogenic in nature and poisonous. Basically, it's like a prized herbal remedy for many ailments in ancient times. So the most noted would be that it's out there to aid barren women with conception by getting the husband tripping and the wife relaxed for coitus. And supposedly, this kind of helps encourage success in creating a baby. Well, as luck would have it, one of Leah's sons came across mandrakes during a harvest. Rachel got wind of this, and being a woman with conception issues, she wanted them. And Leah wasn't willing to give them to her. And at first, all she wanted to do was have it like a war of words. She's accusing Rachel of being a homewrecker, and of course she brought, kind of to a head the fact that Rachel has always been the object of Jacob's desire. So, how does Rachel keep her man and get her mandrakes too? Give me the mandrakes and I'll let you fuck Jacob tonight. Quite literally. And not only does the elder sister agree to this trade, neither of these 2 women bother to discuss the arrangement with Jacob. The poor guy comes in from working in the fields all day, and Leah lets him know she hired his dick for the night and he better be ready. Now, how denigrating can it be to be reduced to a paid gigolo at the mercy of domineering women, too wrapped up in their sibling rivalry to appreciate his even allowing such debasement of position as husband and lover? He has literally been treated like a sperm donor for years at this point. And of course, Leah conceived that night, which gave her cause to declare herself the winner with 6 sons. And by the way, later, she even produces a daughter. And this is in addition to the 2 kids provided by her servant sister wife. And Rachel, his true love, can't even compete with this. I mean, she's only given him 2 sons, and those are by her own servant sister wife. So Leah has like a 7-point lead at this point, and Rachel is still barren. And the elder sister is dripping with superiority as she's basically saying, hey, I've got Jacob's respect at this point. I'm the better wife. So as any god would do, especially a good one, he finally removed the spiritual IUD from Rachel's womb, and she bore Jacob a son, and they named him Joseph. And he would be Jacob's favorite above all the other children. And why? Because true love negates the value of any children caught in the crossfire of a war between sister wives. And that, my friends, is just one more fun tale that most don't read to the bitter end. Stay tuned next week when we talk about using your sister as bait to get what you want from the local king in your district.